Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, did we just witness the greatest climbing performances of all time? Well, the data we have available certainly seems to say that we did. I'll be covering an astounding day at the Tour de France in which Tadej Pogačar asserted his authority over the race after some Visma Lease tactics that left some people scratching their head. I'll also be reporting on a Giro d'Italia women's, which came right down to the wire. This week in the world of racing, we learnt that Primož Roglič can't catch a break. After crashing on stage 11, he crashed again the next day and pulled out of the Tour de France ahead of stage 13. Well, to win number 4 on its way? Quite possibly. We also learnt that Wout van Aert can't seem to catch a break either, as he banged himself up with his own crash on stage 11 and then finished second on the next 2 stages. And finally, we learnt that Tadej Pogačar is the best rider in the world right now. Yesterday on the Plateau de Beille, at the end of a 200-kilometre slog in the mountains, he did what many people have suggested is the best climbing performance in the history of the sport. What is that based on? Previous times on that same climb and guesstimates as to the power he produced. They suggest he averaged somewhere between 6.7 to 6.98 watts per kilogram for 40 minutes. It's also been suggested that Vingegaard produced the second best climbing performance of all time, despite losing over a minute to Pogačar. If that's true, it would mean that his form is as good as it's ever been. It's just that he's up against a rival who is better than he's ever been. To give some sort of context to those performances, we can look at Derek G, who finished 12th on the stage at 6.5 minutes. So he averaged 284 watts for the 5.5 hour stage, normalised to 344 watts, whilst his average power for the 46 minutes it took him to climb Plateau de Beille was 411 watts. If he weighs 70 kilograms, that's a power to weight ratio of 5.87. Now the time that people were comparing to was that of Marco Pantani in 1998. That year, en route to overall victory, Pantani scaled the Plateau de Beille in a time of 43 minutes 28 seconds. Neither Armstrong, nor Contador, nor Rasmussen could better that time, but yesterday it was smashed. So according to Amati Piraili on X, who produced this graphic, Pogačar rode the climb in 39 minutes and 58 seconds, breaking that record by exactly 3.5 minutes. However, it wasn't just Pogačar who broke the record. Both Jonas Vingegaard and Remco Evenepoel were also quicker than Pantani in 1998, whilst Mikel Landa was only 24 seconds slower. So it's not just Pogačar going faster, everybody is at an incredibly high level compared to previous years. Pogačar's average speed on that climb, according to Strava, was 23.8 kilometers per hour. That's on a 15.8k climb with an average gradient of 7.9%. And for the last 5k, so from the moment he attacked Vingegaard to the finish line, he averaged 26 kilometers per hour. Now, I think there was a few people scratching their heads at the tactics of Visma Lease yesterday, and I can understand why. You put your team on the front all day, you have the best rider so far in this tour, so far this season, just sitting on your wheel, you give him a full lead out up the Plateau de Beille, and then he attacks off the back of it and puts another minute into you. It doesn't look like the most sensible of tactics, does it? But in order to be able to understand why they employed that strategy, you have to look back at the last 4 Tours de France to see. So starting with 2021, the one stage in which Vingegaard looked better than Pogačar was stage 11, a 200k stage that included 2 ascents of Mont Ventoux. On the second of those 2 ascents, Vingegaard put around 30 seconds into Pogačar. That was then closed on the descent though. But in 2020, Pogačar was distanced by Roglič on the long, high-altitude climb to Col de la Loze. So Jumbo-Visma, as they were at the time, came to a number of conclusions when thinking about how to beat him. Number 1, cumulative fatigue. They sensed that Vingegaard may have the advantage over Pogačar at the end of long mountainous stages in which a huge number of kilojoules were burnt, and also after multiple stages in which they pushed hard from start to finish. Number 2, they calculated that Pogačar was not at his best on extremely hot days. And number 3, that he suffered on long climbs at high altitude, i.e. over 2,000 metres above sea level. And if we look at the last 2 Tours de France, that's worked. In 2022, the combined attacking of Roglic and Vingegaard on the Telegraph and Galibier led to Pogačar cracking on the finishing climb of the Col de Granon. He lost the Tour de France that day, and Jonas Vingegaard won it. And then last year, they pushed almost every day very hard, even after Pogačar had fought back, with the educated guess that he would eventually pay for all of his efforts and crack. And he did. We all remember the "I'm done, I'm dead" comment from Pogačar on race radio on the Col de la Loze. So that's why they rode like they did yesterday. It was in the hope that A, that cumulative fatigue on a long hot day would reveal cracks that Vingegaard could exploit, and or B, lead to cracks in the third and final week, in which we have a day that peaks at 2,800 metres above sea level. So far that hasn't worked, and from what we've seen, it's probably not going to have the desired effect next week either. Pogačar's power numbers are better than ever, and to be honest, you only have to look at the way he's riding to know that he's better than he's ever been. But if you don't try, you'll never know. The only alternative strategy yesterday would have been to let UAE Team Emirates control the race, which would likely have meant an easier day. And if both of them were fresher at the foot of the Plateau de Beille, the differences could have been even bigger. Now, if Pogačar doesn't crack or show any signs of weakness in the final week of this race, then it's going to be back to the drawing board for Visma Lease bike and Jonas Vingegaard ahead of next year's Tour. Of course, we have to bear in mind that Vingegaard's preparation this year was far from ideal, but at the same time, from all the estimates I've seen online, he's pretty close to his best ever shape. To all intents and purposes, it just looks like Pogačar has stepped it up a level this year, and if he maintains that, Visma's previous winning strategy is probably not going to work anymore. So let's see. This race isn't over yet, but it's hard to envisage Pogačar ceding 3 minutes in the final 6 stages. Anyway, the stage results revealed gaps so big, you'd have been forgiven for thinking you were looking at the general classification. Almost 6 minutes separated Pogačar from Felix Gall in 10th place. If we look at the actual GC, this is how it stands. Pogačar now leads Vingegaard by 3 minutes and 9 seconds, with Evenepoel a further 2:10 behind that. Almeida maintained his 4th place on GC, albeit close to 11 minutes behind his teammate, whilst Landa leapfrogged Rodriguez into 5th. Yates, Ciccone and G stayed in 7th, 8th and 9th respectively, whilst Buitrago moved up 2 places to 10th. Pogačar also leads the polka dot competition, which has the same top 3 as the GC. Evenepoel leads the best young rider, over 6 minutes in front of Rodriguez, whilst UAE are crushing the team's classification, almost an hour in front of Visma Lease bike. A couple of stats now on Tadej Pogačar, which are mind-boggling. Yesterday was his 14th stage win at the Tour de France from a total of 99 stages ridden. It was his 9th Grand Tour stage win of this year from 36 stages ridden, a hit rate of exactly 25%. It was also his 17th win from 46 days of racing so far this season. Every single one of them has been at World Tour level. At the start of this year, he stated that he wanted to become the best rider in the history of cycling, and at this rate, he's not going to be far off. And if you wanted to, you could make the argument that he is the best rider that's ever existed, based purely on speed and power. How long he can maintain this level is a different question, but it doesn't look like his motivation to win is lessening, does it? A quick word now on Remco Evenepoel. If I think of my own expectation of the rides at the Tour de France, I'd say it's Evenepoel that's exceeded that expectation the most. I generally didn't think he'd be this good, and more importantly, this consistent. Yes, there are some tough stages still to come, but when it's mattered on the mountain stages, he's always been the 3rd best rider in the race. Can he improve in the coming years? I reckon so, yeah. Firstly, he also crashed at the Basque Country, albeit with lesser injuries than Vingegaard, but he's also still young, and it's not as if he's been racing since he was 10 years old either. It'll be a bit of a leap to get to the same level as the big two, but this Tour has already been a step up for Evenepoel, despite his well to win, in my opinion at least. It'd be great for the sport though if he did inch closer next year, wouldn't it? At the other end of the race yesterday, well, it was a horrible day out for the sprinters, but almost everybody made it inside the time limit. The Cavendish group rolled across the line with a couple of minutes to spare, whilst Arnaud Démare came across the line less than a minute inside that time limit. Poor Bram Welton, though, was eliminated, finishing a few minutes outside it. It's a really cruel sport, isn't it? A quick wrap up of the other stages from last week now. Pogačar also won the summit finish on Saturday, making him the only rider in history to win on back-to-back summit finishes twice, according to Cillian Kelly. Jasper Philipsen got himself off the mark on Tuesday, sprinting to the win in Saint-Amand-Montreux. Jonas Vingegaard out-sprinted Pogačar to win on stage 11, giving him and his fans hope that the tables were turning. That was a spectacular day to watch, I've got to say. Philipsen took a second stage win into Pau on Friday, but he's still some way off the lead of the green jersey. Biniam Girmay has been the most consistent sprinter at the race this year and took his third stage win on Thursday into Villeneuve-sur-Lot. His lead over Philipsen is now 86 points, and with only one sprint stage remaining, he's 99% sure to be keeping that jersey to the end. The race is going to continue tomorrow with what is the final opportunity for the pure sprinters. Then there are more big mountains ahead, of course, notably on Friday and Saturday, and then a final lumpy time trial around Nice to conclude things on Sunday. Just before I move on, a reminder that 50 of our GCN Plus documentaries are now available to watch on our main GCN YouTube channel if you take out a membership. Huge thanks to everyone who's already taken out a membership. It's really meant so much to us. And to be honest, it's just nice to see that those documentaries are getting watched again after a few months in oblivion since the demise of GCN Plus. So there are 3 membership tiers available over on our main YouTube channel, and you'll need to opt for either the Casquette or Bidon tier to gain access to those 50 films. You may also have noticed that I'm wearing another of our French collection t-shirts today. As I've mentioned before, there's a huge range to choose from this year, and this is another great way to support us if you so wish. All you need to do is head over to shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com to see the full range, as well as a special edition GCN Camelback water bottle. I'll move on to the Giro d'Italia women now, which kicked off with an individual time trial that I reported on last week. Chiara Consonni took the first bunch sprint of the race one day later, getting the better of Kopecky, who picked up some important bonus seconds there. She took 6 more bonus seconds by finishing runner-up again on stage 3, but on that occasion, it was behind her teammate Niamh Fisher-Black. Those bonus seconds put her at just 13 seconds behind time trial winner Elisa Longo Borghini. It was status quo amongst those two on stage 4, where we saw a first ever pro victory for Clara Amond of EF. That was after a 40-kilometre solo raid. Having ridden across the early breakaway, she then dropped them on the climb to San Marino, never to be seen again. Kopecky finally took her first stage win into Foligno on stage 5, at which point she was just 3 seconds behind Longo Borghini with 3 stages remaining. And it got even closer from there. Liana Lippert got the better of Ruth Edwards on stage 6, where there was no change at the top of the GC standings, but the Queen stage came one day later. It finished on the Blockhouse climb, and there was an exceptional performance there from 22-year-old Niamh Bradbury. The Canyon SRAM rider attacked with around 9Ks to go, and by the finish she'd put almost a minute into her closest competitors. And those 2 closest were Kopecky and Longo Borghini. They were locked together most of the way up that climb. Kopecky did attack, but the race leader wasn't budging. However, with bonus seconds still available, the sprint to the line was very important. Kopecky took that, meaning she was trailing by just a single second going to the 8th and final stage. Unfortunately for Kopecky, SD Works were unable to ensure that she could sprint for the win and the bonus seconds that would have come with it. 3 riders held off the rest of the field, with Kim LeCour of AG Insurance Soudal taking the biggest win of her career there, ahead of the ever-consistent Ruth Edwards. As it turned out though, the lack of bonus seconds didn't make a difference. Longo Borghini was glued to Kopecky's wheel until the closing metres, at which point she sprinted away from her to take the first Italian GC win at the race since 2008. It was a cracking race, actually, and such a shame that it's overshadowed by the Tour de France. I really hope they can find a quieter slot in the calendar at some point, or at least any point that isn't the same time as the Tour de France. Anyway, you can catch up on the race on demand if you so wish, over on Discovery Plus and Max, where you can watch a full season of bike racing live. The Tour de l'Ain is on at the moment as well. Normally that comes after the Tour de France, but with the Olympics this year in France, they were forced to change their dates. 20-year-old Fergus Brownie of Trinity Racing won the bunch sprint on the opening day, as the Australian won his under-23 national champs back in January and will no doubt be searching for a full pro contract next year. Stage 2 was won by EF's Jefferson Cepeda, who also put himself into the overall race lead with just one stage remaining today. In other news, the latest long-term contract has gone to Josh Tarling. He's re-signed to Ineos Grenadiers until at least the end of 2027. And just finally, Astana Kazakhstan have a new sponsor, bike company XDS, who have an annual production capacity of 10 million bikes, have agreed to sponsor the team for at least the next 5 years. Discussions were finalised during the Tour de France after initial contact was made at the Shanghai Cycling Show. Now, it's unknown what the budget is going to be, but we understand that the team will be Chinese registered next year and that the rides will be on X-Lab bikes. I'm sure much more is going to emerge on this in terms of detail, so keep your eyes on the GCN Tech Show, which will be out this coming Thursday. Thanks for watching, everyone. That is all for this week. I'll be back next Monday to wrap up the finish of the Tour de France, so I'll see you then.